Welcome to the third episode of Olmsted Overheard, the place for real conversations about what's happening in and around Olmsted Falls, Ohio. I'm your host, Mark McCausland. In our first two episodes, we focused on local elections. These conversations are a part of my vision for this podcast, to cut through the noise and provide a clear, balanced look at the people and the issues shaping our community. My goal is to offer you context and clarity about what's really going on here in Olmsted Falls, whether at City Hall, neighborhood discussions, or in the choices on your ballot. This November, Olmsted Falls will be electing a new mayor. No matter who wins, it's a new mayor for the town. Last episode, we heard from Holly Neumann, one of those candidates. Today, we hear from Chad Gluss, giving you the chance to compare both candidates directly. In this conversation, we'll cover his background, why he's running, and the priorities he sees as most important for our city's future. So whether you've been watching the mayor's race closely or are just starting to tune in, this conversation will give you a clear look at Chad Gluss's vision for Olmsted Falls, straight from the candidate himself. Let's get into it. This is Olmsted Overheard. All right, I'm here with Chad Gluss. Welcome, Chad, for my third episode of my new podcast here. So we are going to do another interview with somebody running for office here in Olmsted Falls, and that is Chad Gluss running for mayor. So Chad, I'm going to turn it over to you to give me your elevator pitch, so to speak. Tell us about you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Chad Gluss. Moved to the city back in 1997. Raised three beautiful daughters here. Live here with my wife, Kim. She's a nurse at Southwest Hospital. Was on the fire department from 2002 to 2022. Retired at the end of 2022 and was voted on to council in 2023, where I've been a Ward 3 councilman now for the past year and a half of a 2-year term.
So you are currently serving on city council, right?
I am.
For Ward 3, correct?
Yes.
And you just said how long you've been on it.
A year and a half
of a
2-year term.
Of a 2-year term. Okay. What led you to run for the council seat?
Well, unfortunately, I was, kind of forced to retire. For those who don't know, I had some medical issues, a heart problem. And I've always, since I moved into the city, I've lived in Ward 3. I started off at Fawn Lake, moved into a townhouse on Sussex, and then ultimately in the house I live on now on Locust, which all are in Ward 3. It's just my community. It's just my neighborhood. Obviously, I didn't want to retire that early, but I always wanted to still continue to get back to the community. I thought, what better way than to run for my ward? So I was fortunate enough to run and win, and that's where I've been for the past year and a half.
The rest is history, right?
The rest is history.
So just out of my own curiosity, you're on city council, but that's not a full-time job. So the rest of it is retired life?
Yes. Well, unfortunately, all of last year was, hospital visits and stuff like that. This year's been much better. My golf game is not much better, but I'm golfing more. Yeah. But yeah, just getting out and talking to people in the community and.
So what have you learned being on council? What are the most significant things about how the city runs that you didn't know before, but now you know from being on council for a year and a half?
Yeah, it's definitely not what you think. Just as in life, so there's 7 council people. There's 1 per ward and then 3 at large. If you come to a council meeting, you would think, we're all on the same page. The truth is that we're not. There's a lot of compromising that goes involved. Give you an example. We've had different issues, like the tax abatement bill.
Sure.
That's been put up 2-3 times and finally passed on the 4th time or 3rd time. I'm sorry. So, from the outside looking in, you think that there's 7 people and a mayor that just are all yes, 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 yes. And then when you get behind the scenes, you're like, well, no, that's not completely true. There is a lot of talking behind the scenes. There is a lot of negotiating behind the scenes. There's a lot of, well, why are you doing this? Or why do you want to do that? Or should we do this because of that? Or if we do this, this will happen. So there is more discussion than people probably realize from the outside.
Sure.
That, and on top of that, it's just not as easy to get things done as you would think they were. A lot of people sit there and say, well, just
do it.
Yeah, just do it. Just stop it. And you're like, well, if it was that easy, we would.
So do you have an example of one thing that sounds easy, but maybe go into some of the details on all the nuance that prevents it from happening?
Yeah, well, sure. Like the recent building.
The developments.
The developments, yes. If somebody owns a piece of property, 30, 40 acres, whatever it is, and they decide that they want to sell it to a developer, they have that right. Now, obviously, the city does have some recourse in how it's going to be built and the density in which it's going to be built and all those things. But it's just not as easy as saying, no, you can't sell your piece of property and build this facility here.
Because then they sue.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's my understanding.
Yes. Yeah. And unfortunately, it has happened in the city before. So, there's a lot more nuances into just saying, I don't want it, so no, we can't have it.
Good to know. What are you most proud of having accomplished on council thus far?
Well, one is we finally got the moratorium for building.
Mm-hmm.
We also put a stop to any new tax abatements.
Right. So any new developments.
Residential.
Right. Yep.
Correct. Still open for commercial. And just the fact that I was able to be elected and serve in this position has been, exciting to me.
What are some of the other big items that have come across council's plate while you've been on there, other than the development and tax abatement stuff?
Yeah. So to go along with that, obviously, is how we're going to handle that. Up until this point, Olmsted Falls has been one of the safest cities in the state of Ohio. I take a little pride in that. I was on the fire department for 21 years. But what does that look like in the future? We're building 400 or 500 homes. Is that 1,000, 2,000 people? We'll see how that all plays out. So, are we going to need to increase police officers? Are we going to need to increase fire department, service department, picking up leaves, plowing roads? All of that is going to have an impact. And then the question is how are we going to manage that? And how are we going to be able to grow that at the same rate that the community is growing?
Yeah. Which, at least in the short term, it feels fast.
Yes.
Yeah. So you've been on council a year and a half.
Yep.
Now you want to make the change and run for mayor.
Yes.
So I want to know, what led you to decide to go from serving on council to maybe, going for re-election on council to changing your mind and going, I want that job. I want to be mayor.
So just like in the fire department, I was a fireman, took classes, studied, became the fire chief. So I'm just always looking at bettering myself. So obviously on a elected level, the first step to me was to go for council. There was some thought in my head to maybe run at large, but then I just thought, well, let's go big or go home. I have a lot of support. I built a lot of relationships in this community with residents, city officials, business owners throughout my years on the fire department. And to me, it was the next logical step. As a fire chief and as a firefighter, I've always been involved in city politics because I've lived in the city also while serving. But as a fire chief, I was able to sit in on budget hearings. I was tasked with putting in 5-year and 10-year projections for the fire department, union negotiations, stuff like that. And so I felt that if I could become the mayor, I could also help navigate some of those things because I have a unique perspective. So, I've been involved in some of that stuff as a city employee, as a city administrator, and now as an elected official. So I've kind of got 3 perspectives on the same situation, whatever it may be. So I kind of have 3 different lenses that I can look at it through.
So there's probably some parallels, obviously your experience has been fire, but
right.
City employee to city administrator, there's going to be parallels from doing that on the fire side versus the police side versus the just general administration side.
Absolutely. So, obviously there'll be some specifics in the service department or in the police department or in, parks and recs or whatever, but the general, how things run, how things are funded, where those monies come from, general budget type issues, those pretty much all do run parallel.
So I need to learn something about city government in our town. What does mayor have responsibility for that you want to have on your plate that you can't do on council?
The mayor he's kind of like the coach, right? So he runs the department, he runs the city on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
Council is in charge of, purse strings, money, and legislative type issues. Up until actually Mayor Graven, let me take that back. I think Mayor Donegan was the first official full-time mayor we had.
Really? Okay.
So prior to Anne-Marie Donegan, it was Bob Bloomquist. And if I recollect, I don't believe he was full-time like Monday through Friday, every day at City Hall. And then obviously as we got busier, as the departments got busier, as things got busier. So as the mayor, he could come in and he's able to make some of those day-to-day decisions that just can't go to council on a daily basis because council only meets twice a month.
So to kind of recap that, sum it up for my purposes mainly is mayor's in charge of the day-to-day.
Mm-hmm.
Council is some of the bigger picture things, purse strings, the financials, obviously legislation has to be approved by council, things of that nature. But the day-to-day operations, mayor.
Yeah, perfect example is the police department wants to buy a police car. It goes through finance director, the mayor, the police chief. They spec it all out. They get all the bids. They work all that out and then say to council, hey, we want to buy a police car. The finance director has said that it's within the budget. We budgeted for it. The price is this. Do you approve or disapprove? That's the part where I like to be involved in hey, let's go look at the police car. We're going to, what equipment do you want it? How do you want it set up? The budget is this. How can we cut this to add that?
Right.
So, and I've been fortunate on the fire department side is, we purchased a fire engine and a ladder truck while I was there. So I was able to be intimately involved with the ladder truck, somewhat involved with the engine, but to see those processes and know how they work. And so now as the mayor, I'll be able to bring that to the community, to the officials and say, hey, let's build this. Let's spec this out. Let's get it for a good price. and then take that to council, they'll vote on it.
Thank you. I appreciate some of that background. You've been on council, now you want to run for mayor. What's the difference and all that? So that's helpful for me. Now we're going to go to more general Olmsted Falls topics of conversation. So just broadly speaking, tell me, what do you think of Olmsted Falls?
Well, I love it. Like I said, I moved here in 1997. To me, it's hometown. It's quaint. Everybody seems to be pretty friendly. We have a great school system. All three of my daughters graduated through the school system. I love the little historic downtown. I probably go to the ice cream shop a little more than I should. But, it's nice because it's small, it's quaint. I think we said kind of everybody knows you, but not everybody knows you.
Yeah.
Type of
But it's
deal.
not uncommon for me to see people I know when I'm just walking around.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I love that.
Yeah. And for me, I have a little bit different perspective because being on the fire department,
Absolutely, yeah.
I'll run into people that I was, hey, you picked up my mom last night. Thank you so much, blah, blah. So and I really do enjoy that. I mean, I've always enjoyed serving the community in which I live.
So what would you say are the 2 to 3 biggest issues on Olmsted Falls citizens' minds when it comes to living here?
Well, I'll negate the building and the tax abatements because I believe everybody agrees with that. In my opinion, those are the 2 biggest. But some of the issues that some people may not necessarily know that some people have issues with, like walkability. We've talked about being able to get to downtown Olmsted Falls. Some of the seniors in the community need senior transportation. We do have a senior center, but it's really not conducive for seniors because there's steps and there's the length of the building to get from one side to the other. Some of these people are either wheelchair bound or walk with walkers, or they can walk, but they're a limited mobility. So to me, those are some big issues that I think need to be addressed.
What else?
So the other one, and some people have been making fun of this, but, Olmsted Falls has a feral cat issue. Truthfully, I never knew it existed, but it started off with my ward. I had a couple people reach out to me because, we have an apartment complex in my ward. It appears what's happening is people are moving in and then moving out and leaving their animals. And so those animals now become feral cats in the wild. And as I've been going door to door and as I've been talking to people, I'm finding out that there is pockets of other little communities or other neighborhoods in our community that are actually having the same problem. I had a gentleman approach me and say that his mom lives over on Forest View and she can't even sit on her back patio because as soon as she sits out, 3 or 4 cats come running up to her.
Wow.
So we need to try to figure out a way that we can mitigate that. And I'm not sure if you followed on Facebook, Megan Coy and I are currently working on something. We're being a little vague right now because we don't have everything nailed down yet.
Sure.
We're trying to get a vet to commit to doing it on a regular basis. And we haven't signed anything yet. So I don't want to be like, oh, we're going to do this. And then it doesn't fall through.
Yeah, so that's fair. All right. So then the other framing of it is, what are the biggest issues on your mind in particular? Chad Gluss, for mayor, what do you want to get done?
Well, so the number one thing on my mind is taxes. Let's be honest, everybody's going to be upset about taxes. One thing that I've found throughout my years of going to people's homes through the fire department and now as an elected official is, there's people who are either elderly and are fearful of being taxed out of their home. There are some young families, say maybe yourself and your wife decide, hey, we want to have a baby, but I would like my wife to be a stay-at-home mother, and find out that they can't do that. I was shocked to find out that there's people in Olmsted Falls paying $10,000, $12,000, $13,000 a year in property taxes.
Right.
So I really think that we need to look at a way to change the way that the city is funded from property taxes. I personally like the idea of a more income tax based solution for several reasons. Let's say this was your grandmother's home.
Sure.
And they bought it back in the 60s for $100,000. Well, now it's worth $400,000. Well, now you retire and you're paying taxes on a $500,000 house, but you're only bringing in whatever, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in Social Security. In my opinion, I would rather see it have you where you don't have any city property taxes. And then that way, when you go on that fixed income, your taxes are based on what your income would be. So as you're younger, making more money, working, you don't have a problem paying a little bit more in taxes. As you get older and or decide you want to be a one family or one working family house, pay a little less. Most people don't know is, so in Olmsted Falls, 83% of our residents-ish work outside the city, which means that they only pay 0.75% income tax.
Because of all the RETA.
Because of all the stuff. But you go to our neighboring communities, and, Strongsville and these places, they're paying 1.5, 1.72% income. And if you also notice, a lot of those communities don't have all of the levies that we have.
Sure.
And that's one of the reasons why we have those levies is because of our income tax is actually low. So Again, this is nothing I could do as elected a mayor. It's nothing I could go in and say, hey, we're going to do this. It would have to go to a vote of the people. But I think that my number one priority is if I did get elected, I was able to talk to people and try to change the way that the city brings income in and go more to an income tax based as opposed to a property tax based. And actually, as I've been talking to people, it's really started to gain some traction, especially with the elderly.
So then that's a good lead into my follow-up question on this is, should you become mayor, then what is step one to making that a reality? You just said that it's not necessarily in your purview as mayor to, with a one fell swoop of a pen, make that happen. So what's the action plan look like?
So the action plan is to put a comprehensive plan together with Rita and the finance director, show what, if the voters were to vote to increase the income tax, say to 1.5 or 2, whatever the number is, what that would bring in, what our current levies bring in, and if passed, let the current levies either expire, and I don't know how that works. I don't know if I have to let them expire or if I could just call the county and say, hey, after this year, we're just not going to collect on that. I don't know the actual about that, but then be able to show the people, hey, yes, your income tax may go up $1,000 a year. Your property taxes are going to go down $1,000 a year, or whatever those numbers come out to be. So that would be my first step. Then my next step would, like I said, get out there, have open houses, sit down and talk to people and really educate them and say, hey, this is what it would look like. And the truth of the matter is, there may be some people out there like, no, I'd rather just pay the property tax as opposed to income tax. And then there's going to be people out there that say, no, this, makes complete sense. I would prefer to do it this way. But I think the most important thing would be to educate people what those numbers are and what it would look like.
Right. And obviously, making a change like that, you'd have to have the analysis done to show that you wouldn't be losing out on city services or anything.
Correct.
Nothing would be degraded because of it.
Absolutely not.
Would still have to operate and everything.
And the goal of it would be to actually increase city services. And, in my opinion, if everybody in the city is working and doing well and we're prosperous, then, just like we run our households, right? So, we have what we need. And then if we go through a downturn when there's times are tough, then the city has to tighten up its budgets too.
Because their money's coming from people's incomes.
Because their people's coming from incomes, And there is a movement now to try to get rid of all property taxes.
At the state level,
At the state level, which is really kind of what caught my eye on it. And what was interesting is I was talking to another city official about this, and literally a week later, I jumped on Facebook, and the city of Avon just did this back in March.
Eliminated property taxes?
City property taxes.
City property, sure.
So what they did is they said, hey, if you vote for this tax, it will bring in X. And if it brings in this, we won't need to collect the police levy, the fire levy, the road levy, this, because we'll be able to pay it out of this. And I have some friends over there, and they were actually surprised because they thought for sure it would fail. And it actually passed overwhelmingly.
Interesting.
So that's really where I started to take the ball and start moving forward with this, because I'm like, all right, well, here's 2 other entities that are looking at doing this. Here's an entity that's looking at doing it pretty much what I'm looking. And understand it would strictly start off with just city tax.
Right.
I wouldn't be able to, I can't do anything about a school or county or state. But here's another community who did it. I've actually reached out to them. I've been in contact with them. So they're kind of helping me along with, if I get elected, kind of here's a playbook to help you, what we did. Yeah, it's exciting. I really look forward to trying to show people that I think it would be a better option.
Yeah. No, cool. From my perspective as a voter, as long as you do it the right way, right? And make sure that we're not caught without money to pay for things that people rely on.
Absolutely. And again, the nice part is it can't be me. It's going to be a vote. Whether I win or lose, I can't just walk in there and say, hey, this is how we're going to do it. It still has to go to vote to the people.
But getting the information together, getting the analysis run and
I just believe that is what the position of the mayor is supposed to do, is they're supposed to gather that information and they're supposed to provide it to the community and let the community make those decisions. I used to joke, this isn't Chad Gluss Falls, right? So you're not going to get what I want you to have. Take the rec center for that. My job isn't to say, hey, yes, you will get a rec center, or no, you won't get a rec center. My job is to say, okay, I've talked to this community. They have rec centers. It's going to cost X to build. It's going to cost Y to maintain. It's going to cost the average citizen, household, whatever, X amount of dollars per year. And this is what it is. Is this what you want? It's not my job to say, well, I think you want this, so I'm going to give it to you. Or I don't think you want this, and I'm not giving it to you. So kind of same thing with the taxes.
No, that makes sense. So I was about to ask, hey, is there another thing on your mind? Was the rec center one of those, or is there something else that maybe you'd want to?
I don't necessarily, if I want to say a rec center, but we definitely need to increase our recreational facilities in Olmsted Falls.
Yeah.
I had mentioned earlier, our seniors need something better.
Is the senior center based out of the community center?
No, it's actually based out of City Hall. So
very much vertical.
Yeah. So, there is an elevator there.
Right.
But it's a very long hallway to get down there. It's a very long hallway to get back. And then again, like communities. Like I said, I moved in this community in 1997, and all I've ever heard is we need a rec center, we need a rec center, we need a rec center, we need a rec center. So I would really like to explore that. I'd really like to put some actual pen to paper. This is what it would look like. This is where it would. There was some talk about a JORD that was ultimately voted no against.
What is that?
So the JORD is a joint economic recreation district with the township.
Yeah.
So the city had decided that they did not want to be part of that. That may be something else that we could look into. But yeah, I mean, I think those are the recreation and the senior stuff. And I guess I'm a little partial to the senior stuff just because running on the fire department like I did and seeing some of the stuff that I saw, like, we could do better, in my opinion.
And is there anything else?
So one of the things I would like to see if I'm elected, and I've said this, I am not going to suggest that Olmsted Falls and Olmsted Township become one city. However, I believe it's time for at least a professional, comprehensive study and plan to say, hey, if it were to happen, this is what it would look like, and this is how it would have to happen. I think we need to just get some professionals in here and say, hey, if you want to do this, this is how it'll be. Clearly, it'd have to be a vote of the people. So it's not something that...
But to your point earlier, if you were mayor, you would hear what these people are talking about.
Right.
And you would find the information.
Exactly.
And then let them choose.
Exactly. Because I've heard over the years, why do we have 2 police chiefs? Why do we have 2 fire chiefs? Why do we have, 2 service departments? We share this, we share that. Well, to my knowledge, there has not been an official comprehensive study that says X, Y, Z, here's the playbook. And I realize that's going to cost some money. And I think, in my opinion, the Falls and the Township should at least look at, looking at that.
Yeah.
And then the reality is that study could come out and we could both look at each other and say, maybe this isn't a good idea.
Right. But at least we know.
At least we know. Yeah. At least we know. And at least we have some professionals that say, hey, we've seen these type of things happen across the country. Here's ones that worked. Here's ones that didn't. With the ones that worked, here's why. The ones that didn't, here's why. And then at least we have the information. And then at that point, put it up to a vote. And if they vote yes, they vote yes. And if they vote no, they vote no.
I'm going to transition a little bit. Let's talk about some of the things that might be chatter that you hear about when people hear about Chad Gluss. Mm-hmm. It's no secret that you were fire chief before.
Correct.
And there was, as Cleveland.com put it, tension between you and Mayor Graven.
Yes.
Do you want to take an opportunity and give here in a recording, as opposed to a written interview in Cleveland.com, your side of the story?
Yeah. My side of the story is pretty much like what I told Cleveland.com. I was the fire chief. The mayor and I did not see eye to eye on how the department could and should run, and basically said, hey, if you think that you could do it better, here you go. And, I know there's been some chatter about, the only reason I'm running for mayor is because, I want to get Mayor Graven. Well, first of all, I guess that's a moot point now because he's not running. And number 2, if he was running and that was my position, how does that help the community?
Well, it doesn't. That's why people are concerned about it.
Right. And I said that in Cleveland.com, anybody who knows me knows that my heart and soul is in this community. As the fire chief, as a firefighter, and as a council person, I've always put the communities first. One of my prior mayors never liked me because I used to always say, she'd say, well, that's not in the budget. My job's not to worry about the budget. My job's to come to you and tell you what I need.
Right.
As the fire chief. So, the tension between Mayor Graven and I has nothing to do with running for office, should have nothing to do with what's best for this community. I think that on council, I've voted many times with him. Perfect example is his elimination of the tax abatement. As a matter of fact, at one point, me and another council person were the only 2 people that voted with him.
It was Megan Coy, I believe, right?
Yes, absolutely. So as of right now, I have no tension. I mean,
Sure.
If I see him somewhere, I'll shake him hand and say hi. And
so, just playing devil's advocate, if I was a citizen super concerned about this, and I hear you say, well, no, that's not why I'm running. So then my follow-up would be, well, then why are you running?
Well, and I think I said this before.
You did, but it's just like...
Sure. Well, the reason I'm running is, like I said, I love this community. I've raised 3 beautiful daughters here. My wife and I plan on dying here. I served as a firefighter, fire chief under that role. Unfortunately, that was cut a little short,
And that was cut short due to the health issues, correct?
Yes.
Not because of the tension.
No.
Right?
No. In 2022, I had to retire because I had a defibrillator placed. Ultimately, I'm sure most people know, but last year I had a complete heart transplant.
Right.
So,
and how are you doing, by the way?
I'm doing awesome.
Okay.
Well, you see me. I look good.
You do, yeah.
Listen, it hasn't helped my golf game. but no, I'm doing awesome. But yeah, so as far as why am I running? Like I said, my initial thought was just to get back to the community, be able to help out, make some decisions. So that's why I ran for council. And then just, the leader in me and the always wanting more and better, the next logical step was to move up that ladder. I had mentioned, there was some thought about running for council at large, but ultimately decided, I'm just going to run for mayor and I'll skip the at large part.
All right. So then the other item that one could say is possibly controversial, I don't know what the right word would be.
Sure.
It's an item that recently had a lot of traction on Facebook. There is, and I'm going to leave it to you to describe this the correct way legally, because it is outstanding. It is a pending item. There is a lawsuit involving you and workers' comp that the city is also a part of. I'm going to turn it over to you to describe that. Everybody who's listening, please bear in mind that this is an outstanding legal issue, so there's only so much that Chad can say about it.
Right.
So I don't want to step on his toes there, but go ahead.
Right. So obviously there was recently a Facebook post about this. And again, I have to be very careful what I say. I can't say too much, but I am not suing the city. I do have an outstanding workers' comp claim. It's 2.5 years old. It's still tied up in the court system, and I'm not sure when it'll be resolved. There's some chatter out there that it's coming out of the general fund, or who so-and-so's going to have to pay for this or pay for that. Nobody knows. It hasn't been done yet. But I will say it's not coming out of the general fund. It is a workers' comp issue. And I can't go into detail, but there is more than one community involved. It's not just Olmsted Falls.
The other thing, as a citizen voting, right, there's the possible conflict of interest angle that would be concerning to me. So can you address that?
Yeah, correct. So, there was some concern that if I became the mayor, I'd be able to vote on it. Well, number one...
Or settle it or something, right?
Yes. Yeah. So, first of all, that's not true. Every legal issue that I've been involved with as a council person has to come through city council. So the mayor cannot just say, give them X, Y, and Z. Now, the mayor can come up with the settlement, but at the end of the day, council has to vote on that, number one. Number two, I would almost guarantee that the law director, whoever that person is at the time, including the current law director, would advise to abstain and not be involved in any kind of vote or discussion, or just recluse yourself altogether in that.
All right, we're going to turn to talking about, again, the positives of living here. If you were to bullet point it out, the 3 biggest strengths about Olmsted Falls, living in Olmsted Falls, what would they be to you?
Well, the first one would be obviously the sense of community, being able to, like I said, it's small enough to where you kind of know everybody, but it's also big enough to where you don't know necessarily everybody's business. So I would definitely say that's number one. Number two, I would say our downtown district. I mean, as a firefighter, I was a fire inspector for 8 years. I was in and out of those businesses all the time. And the way that they come out and support anything in this community, whether it be the football team, the basketball team, somebody having a fundraiser for the kids' soccer game, whatever. The business community really always stepped up. And then, obviously number 3 is the school system. They put out a very good product.
And you've had 3 daughters go through it.
3 daughters go through it.
You've seen it.
I have.
And then the last official question I have, and we can keep chatting if you want, but sure. If you were to picture Olmsted Falls, I don't know, 5 years in the future, some future version of Olmsted Falls, and it was the best that it could be, what would be different about it then versus now?
Well, I think we touched on this about the way that we generate our revenue. Unfortunately, physically, it's going to be hard to change. Unfortunately, the building is already started. Those projects.
No matter who's mayor, no matter who's on council, those
exactly.
Are in play.
Yeah. No matter who the mayor is, they're not going to be able to wipe them off the map. So a better version would be, like I said, number 1 is the way that we collect our revenues. Number 2, I think, again, the walkability. I think being able to get some of the farther developments, able to get access up to the downtown area. Now strategically it's a little hard because some of our stuff runs through Olmsted Township.
Yeah, it's a little complicated on the map.
Yeah. And so you can't just say, hey, we're going to put a sidewalk in your front yard, even though you're not in our community. So there is some of those struggles. But the biggest struggle there is obviously just the finances, which, that money's got to come from somewhere. But one of my goals, and I currently have somebody that I'm working with and hopefully will hire, as a grant writer for the city, and be able to access some of these, monies that are out there for projects exactly like that.
Right.
It's not a new concept in Olmsted Falls. I mean, we've been doing it for years. I was involved in several at the fire department level. But I think it's time now that we may be at the point where we need to hire somebody that's really their forte in all that they do.
Well, Chad, those are all my formal questions that I had written out. What else do you want to say about yourself or about your candidacy or the town or anything on your mind?
Nothing. I hope people hear this. Obviously, I hope they vote for me. I've dedicated, 21 years of my life to the fire service. I've dedicated the past 27 of my years of my life to this community. My slogan is Gluss is for us. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm always going to put us first, meaning the community, in the decisions that I make. Some of my guys at the fire department will actually tell you, there's some decisions that I made that I didn't necessarily, I don't want to say agree with, but I wasn't real happy to do, but it was the right thing to do. And it was, in that scenario, putting the guys first. So I was able to make that decision and say, okay, we're not talking about like a life or death policy. When I would write SOGs or write policies, obviously there were some things there that, listen, there's some rules you have to follow.
Some things are black and white.
Yeah.
So at that level.
Yeah. But, like we had a conversation one time just about uniforms. And I thought they should be wearing this, and they really didn't want to wear that. And we compromised and said, you know what, I'll give you this one.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you were able to share an example, because I think that is a crucial component of a leader in any organization, but especially, for a political type of leader to, be willing to put their own interests aside if that's what they're hearing that the community wants. Yeah.
Listen, absolutely. And one perfect example of this is, so when I went out campaigning for Ward 3, I had told people, and I'm going to bring back up the recreational center. I told people, I don't necessarily know that I want to build a rec center with a pool and all this stuff and cost all this money. Okay. First of all, my kids are all grown. My wife and I probably aren't going to use it. So I probably don't want it. However, I would still put it on the ballot and say, hey, this isn't what I want, but is this what you guys want?
Right. Because you've heard enough that some people want it. So let's find out.
So perfect examples of feral cats.
Yeah. Right.
I had no idea we had feral cats. Yeah. I don't think I actually even knew what a feral cat was. No, I'm just kidding. I did. But I realized, hey, just because I don't have feral cats in my backyard doesn't mean the people over, on Fernwood aren't having an issue. And that's where I say, hey, it's not my issue. I don't care because it doesn't affect me. That's the wrong attitude. The wrong attitude is, okay, well, how do we fix this?
Well, Chad, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah, you too. And that's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Olmsted Overheard. If you found it helpful, be sure to subscribe and share it with a neighbor so more people can stay informed about what's happening here in Olmsted Falls. With both mayoral candidates now having joined me on this podcast, I will continue to reach out to candidates for other offices to see if I can squeeze in an interview before election time. After that, I look forward to tackling other local topics that might be on your mind. I'm Mark McCausland, and this has been Olmsted Overheard. See you next time.